The movie The Matrix gave us so many ideas. It was quite ahead of its time. One of the ideas that has persisted in popular culture is the idea of the red pill or the blue pill. And this was a scene where Neo, the hero of the movie, was offered a blue pill that would make him forget everything and sort of go back to this numb state of affairs where he didn't have to worry about things. He just became part of the Matrix. Or the red pill that would wake him up and make him alive and alert to the problems of the world. In a way, it was an echo of the archetype of the Garden of Eden and eating from the tree of knowledge. And would you, if you had the choice, prefer the bliss of ignorance as opposed to the stress and pain of knowledge? And this is something we think about, I think, all the time. How much news do we consume, and can you consume too much? And is it better sometimes not to know and not to live out personally the stress of the world? And I tell you this because I think independent journalists by nature have decided to be red-pilled, have decided that it's better to know the truth rather than the corporate gruel served up, the homogenized, normalized corporate message that emanates from legacy media, from the CBC and CTV and the Globe and Mail, etc. And never before has that been clearer than the coverage, for example, of the war between Israel and Hamas, where you look at the Bowdlerized version on CBC and CTV, neither of which, by the way, will ever refer to Hamas as a terrorist group, versus the direct information that we now learn about the war and many other subjects because of Twitter, especially under Elon Musk, who has taken Twitter out of the corporate media matrix. So I think by nature, independent journalists, citizen journalists, and those who watch them make the choice in that movie, The Matrix, to take the red pill. Here's a flashback of that movie in case you haven't seen it or don't remember it.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Well, one of my favorite independent journalists, citizen journalists in this country, really I think he is my favorite, who doesn't work for Rebel News, is our dear friend Andrew Lawton, who has a career from the mainstream media. In fact, for quite a while he worked for the mainstream media, but now he is a leading journalist with our friends and allies over at True North. And what a delight to spend the course of the next 45 minutes or so with him, talking about the year that passed, but more importantly, looking forward to 2024, and in particular, the role of citizen journalists like him and I guess like us. Andrew, great to see you again.
Hey, always good to be here. Thanks for the invitation, and happy holidays in a non-politically correct way to you and all your audience.
Well, you know what? I appreciate that. And it's crazy how, the holidays, we have a Christmas party here at Rebel News. I'm not Christian myself, I'm Jewish, but I think Christmas parties are something that people from all backgrounds can get behind. It is obviously a religious ceremony underneath, but it's something everyone can get into. And at our Christmas party, we had a little menorah that we lit because there's a few Jews here in the company beside myself. And the crazy thing is the war on Christmas, and I guess you could say the war on Hanukkah, has always been more a rhetorical thing. People who say, well, don't say Merry Christmas, say season's greetings. Mm-hmm. But Andrew, this season, menorahs, that's the Jewish candelabra, menorah lightings, which have happened for decades, have suddenly been banned or canceled. The city of Moncton canceled theirs, later rescinded that. In Calgary, the mayor, Jody Gondek, refused to light the Jewish menorah, saying it was divisive. And in some places, they banned the Jewish menorah and realized, oh, yikes, we can't just ban the Jews. So to compensate and equalize, they banned Christmas decorations as well. So I know I'm going on at some length about your offhand comment, Merry Christmas, but actually I think the war on Christmas and the war on Hanukkah has never been this dire because we are afraid of standing up for Judeo-Christian values in the era of Islamic terrorism. I think that's just what it is.
It is, and I please don't take this the wrong way, but I'll say one constant throughout history has been that Jewish people are victims, and I don't mean that in the sense that their identity is victimhood, but I mean it's a constant through history that the Jewish people have been targeted by other people. Now, I'd say the real story of the Jewish people is their resilience and their survival and their thriving in spite of that. But why it's so dangerous when you look at the climate around is that this history of Jewish people being persecuted at every stage in their existence and being the number one victim of hate crimes in every statistic that's ever been looked at on this subject. Anti-Semitism always dwarfs other forms of hatred. But we have now made Jews the oppressors and Jews the majority, and Jews are white. Jews are all of the things that we've decided to vilify, in the same way that many people mocked the idea that Harvard said Asians were whites when it came to affirmative action. We've now said that Jews are whites, Christians, majority when it comes to this oppressor-oppressee dynamic. And this is why the menorah, which is literally in Canada a symbol of a minority religion, is now treated the same way that so many of these Christian traditions have been. We've now decided that Jews are at the top of the pecking order. Therefore, we are okay. We are licensed to vilify them and start stripping away all of these aspects of their identity in the public square. And it's so disheartening. Now, I don't think we should do this with any group. We shouldn't do it with Christians. We shouldn't do it with Jews. But I think this is why the majority, and by that I mean the tyrannical woke majority, has been licensed to attack Judaism in this way that we've seen so explicitly this year.
You know, you said so many fascinating things there. I think you're right about Jews sort of being a canary in a coal mine. There's a philosopher in Europe who said, where books burn, men will in turn burn. And I think he was right. And that was, the Nazis had their book burnings. But there's another way of looking at it, where Jews burn, Christians will burn as well. They go for the Saturday people first, then the Sunday people. I've been to Bethlehem. I've been to those formerly Christian cities in the West Bank. Egypt itself used to be a Christian country. Now it's maybe 10% Coptic Christian. The Christians in Iraq who were extirpated by ISIS and now the Iranian militia called Hashd al-Shabi. I think those who say, well, that's just the Jews, and the Jews are a bit much, and the Jews are a bit of a pain, and let's just buy ourselves some peace by voting for a UN resolution condemning the Jews. It never stops there. It never stops there. I think of terrorist attacks throughout Europe. Of course, there are attacks on Jewish institutions, but most of the terror attacks in Europe and even in North America are not on Jewish targets. They're just on Western targets. And I think in some ways, Jews who, are Jews a minority? Of course they're a minority. Are they a racial minority? I think most Jews are white, although there are darker skinned Jews from other places. But I think that attacks on the Jews are rooted in that same critical race theory that you just talked about, putting the whole world into two camps, oppressors and the oppressed. And the oppressed can do literally anything against the oppressors, and it's justifiable. And I think that is a warm-up act for the war against the West generally. And look at us talking about critical race theory and the Jews and the war when I did want to talk mainly about independent journalism. But I think there is some connection between the two, because were it not for social media and citizen journalists, I think we would be getting a very different coverage of that war. Listen, I don't want to talk just about the war and about Jews and Christians.
But if I can jump in there, and I feel it bridges the gap between this topic and where we wanted to go with on this. You mentioned in your introduction mainstream media's refusal to call Hamas a terror group, and what a fascinating display of inconsistency and incoherence. Because you may recall when the Canadian government listed the Proud Boys on its list of terrorist entities in Canada, the Proud Boys is officially a terrorist group. So the media used that as cover to say, okay, well, the terrorist group Proud Boys, even when individuals were not associated with allegations of terror. And then you look at Hamas, which has the very same legal designation. It is an official terrorist entity in Canada. And CBC says, well, yeah, I mean, that's just the government's way of looking at it. That doesn't mean it binds our editorial editorial guidance. And it's amazing how the appeal to authority only works when it fits the narrative. When it doesn't, they will ignore that and come up with their own parameters. And to go back to independent media, that's why I think independent media outlets are so important, because they have a lot more of a connection to reality and a lot more of a connection to, I think, how ordinary people see these phenomena unfolding.